Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, friends. How are you this morning? Or whenever you're watching this. Still have that habit. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Today we start the fourth chapter of the Lotus Sutra, BDK translation, from Kumarajiva's Chinese translation, one of them anyway. This one's called Willing Acceptance. Now, depending on the translation, there'll be a slightly different title. But remember, you've heard me say this so many times, Buddhism is about attitude and intent, right? So what do you think willing acceptance means? So we're still in the beginnings, right, of the Lotus Sutra. And so far, everything's been about attitude and intent, right? Skillful Means. I've been teaching for 42 years or more. And now I'm telling you that this teaching is the ultimate teaching. What I've taught you before was just provisional. Doesn't make me a liar. Just means that I was teaching to your capacity. Now, this is it. The parable, how sometimes as a teacher, right, this Lotus Sutra is about Bodhisattva practice. So now he's saying, now as a teacher, remember telling Shariputra, when you go out and teach people, keep this lesson in mind. You have to appeal to what people know. And eventually their experience, their insights will grow, and then you can teach them further. As their capacity grows, you can teach them more, right? And I talked about that as a matter of the second point he made in the parable is that you can't just willy-nilly teach this to everyone. You have to take into consideration where people's minds are. Where's their attitude and intent? And if they have no idea or no intent to learn about self-enlightenment, then, plant the seed, if you will, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, but don't push it. Don't waste your time. Because the waste isn't that your time is so precious that you shouldn't tell anyone about Buddhism. That's not the waste of time. The waste of time is, worse than that, is that if you teach this practice or try to teach this practice to people who aren't ready, who aren't willing, who aren't engaged in this seeking of self-betterment, self-enlightenment, well then there's a very good chance that they're going to backlash on you, and they'll start making causes thinking that they're putting you down, but in essence, they'll be attacking their own enlightenment. And that's horrible. So you don't want to plant that problem, right? So be responsible. Do this nice and easy. Be aware of people's capacities. Right? So now, willing acceptance. Obvious next step. If you're going to start to begin to learn this path, then you have to have that attitude, that intent, that whatever I learn is going to be changing the way I think about life, myself, right? That I'm actually willing. I'm willing to put in my confidence and try, right? So let's see how it goes. At that time, the noble Subhuti, Mahakaccayana, Mahakashyapa, and Mahamaugalyayana, having heard the unprecedented teaching from the Buddha and the Bhagavat's prediction of Shariputra's highest complete enlightenment, were filled with wonder and ecstatic joy. Wow, right? For all this time, for over, maybe 40 years they've been following Shakyamuni. They've always been told that learning and realization, right, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, would never reach enlightenment, as they were filled with incorrigible disbelief. They were arrogant. Even the Arhats, right, that got up and left in the first chapter, they'll never reach enlightenment. And now Shariputra, who's a Shravaka, Shakyamuni predicted his full, complete enlightenment. So these other disciples were like, holy crap, it's finally possible through this teaching, right? So yeah, they're ecstatic. They immediately rose from their seats, straightened their garments, leaving their right shoulder bared, and touched their right knee to the ground. With rapt attention and with palms pressed together, they bowed in veneration and, gazing at the Bhagavat's face, said to the Buddha, "We are the seniors of the Sangha, old and feeble. We considered ourselves to have attained nirvana and to be incapable of further seeking highest complete enlightenment, so we did not do so." Oops. It has been a long time since the Bhagavat taught the Dharma in the past. Now we sit with weary bodies and only contemplate emptiness, signlessness, and wishlessness. Neither the Bodhisattva teaching, nor the carefree sporting with transcendental powers, nor the pure Buddha worlds, nor helping sentient beings attain enlightenment produced any eager desire in us. Why is this? Because the Bhagavat caused us to leave the triple world and to attain nirvana. Right? Blame Shakyamuni for it. But now we are old and feeble. We did not take even a single thought of pleasure in the Buddha's inspiration of the Bodhisattvas to the highest complete enlightenment. And now, in the presence of the Buddha, we have heard the Shravakas receive their prediction of highest complete enlightenment, and we are very joyful to have obtained such an unprecedented experience. We never considered that we would suddenly be able to hear this marvelous teaching, and we are overjoyed that we have attained such great benefits, an immeasurable treasure which we attained, though unsought and unwanting. Interesting. So we've practiced hard, and we were told we'd never get there, but we got to where we could. Nirvana as a release in samsara, and we've achieved that. We never thought it would lead us to complete enlightenment, right? I mean, you told us we wouldn't. Oh, Bhagavat, we now wish to give an illustration to clarify what we mean. Suppose there were a man who, when he was still a child, left his father and ran away. Living in another region for a long time, he passed the age of 10, 20, even 50 years. The older he got, the more impoverished he became. He went searching everywhere for food and clothing, and while he was wandering about, he started back by chance in the direction of his native country. From the first, the father had looked for his son, but in vain. In the meantime, he had stayed in the city and become extremely wealthy, and now possessed uncountable treasures. This is the father, right? Searching for his runaway son, who has slowly become destitute, right? The father's storehouses were all filled to overflowing with gold, silver, lapis lazuli, coral, amber, crystal, and other such things. Obviously, jewels were very valued in the day, yeah? Just demonstrations, symbols of wealth, yeah? He had many servants, subordinates, and clerks, as well as innumerable too, elephants, horses, carriages, cows, and sheep. He profited through lending, and his trade with other countries was also great. So he was a merchant. Then the impoverished son, after wandering through many villages from one country and city to another, finally reached the city where his father lived. He didn't know it, but although the father had constantly thought about his son from whom he had been separated for over 50 years, he nevertheless had spoken to no one about it. He brooded and grieved in his heart, thinking to himself, I have become old and feeble, and although I have many treasures and storehouses filled with gold, silver, and precious jewels, I have no son. When I die, my treasures will be scattered and lost for lack of someone to whom to entrust them. So this is a story, right? These senior monks are saying to Shakyamuni as though they don't begrudge him. They've achieved a great deal. They're just sad that they won't have the full accomplishment of their life, right? To become fully, completely enlightenment. And now they're told that they will. So this is why they're joyful. Let's see how the story goes here. It was for this reason that he was always thinking anxiously about his son. He also thought, if I could get my son back and leave my fortune to him, I would be relieved and happy and without further worry. It's amazing, we talk about the almighty dollar today and the chasing after wealth and so forth. It's always been this way. Yeah. Oh, Bhagavat, at that time, the impoverished son who had been wandering about, taking odd jobs, by chance finally reaching his father's house. Standing at the side of the gate, he saw his father in the distance, sitting on the lion's seat with his feet propped up on a jeweled stool, respectfully surrounded by Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and householders. His body was adorned with pearl necklaces worth thousands of myriads. He was attended on both sides by clerks and servants holding whisker fans. Above was a jeweled canopy with various hanging flowered banners. Perfume was sprinkled on the ground, which was strewn with a variety of beautiful flowers. Boy, servitude was big, huh? There were rows of precious objects, and people were coming and going, buying and selling. With various trappings such as these, the father appeared very majestic indeed. The impoverished son, seeing his father wielding such great power, became terrified and regretted that he'd ever come to that place. He thought to himself, he must be a king or of similar rank. This is not my place. Where can I obtain things as a hired worker? It would certainly be better for me to be in a poor village, or to go to a poor village, a place where I can use my ability and easily obtain clothing and food. No opportunity for me here, right? If I stay here for very long, I will be seized and put to forced labor as a slave, yeah? Thinking this way, he quickly fled. At that time, the wealthy man sitting on the lion's seat realized that he had seen his son and became extremely happy, and he thought, now there is someone to whom I can leave my fortune and treasures. I have been constantly thinking about my son, but had no way to meet him, and now suddenly he's come. This is exactly what I wanted, although I'm old and I still yearn for him. The man immediately dispatched his attendants to chase his son and bring him back. Then the attendants quickly ran and overtook him. The impoverished son was frightened and cried out in fear, "No! I did nothing wrong. Why are you seizing me?" The attendants grabbed him more firmly and forced him to return. Then the impoverished son thought, they have seized me even though I've done nothing wrong. I shall certainly be killed. He was so terrified that he collapsed unconscious on the ground. His father, seeing this from a distance, told the attendants, "I don't need him. Don't force him to come. Pour cold water on his face and bring him to consciousness. Don't say anything more to him." What was the reason for this? The father knew that his son was of lowly aspiration and that his own health or wealth and position would cause him problems. Although the father knew, without doubt, that the man was his son, he used skillful means and did not say to the others, "This is my son." The attendant then said to the son, "You are free to go wherever you wish." Then the impoverished son, happy because he had never felt such relief, stood up and went to a poor village to seek for food and clothing. That's his state of being, right? At that time, wanting to get his son back, the wealthy man employed skillful means and secretly dispatched 2 attendants of wretched and humble appearance. He said to them, "Approach the impoverished fellow and gently tell him that there is a place for him to work where he will be paid double. If he gives his assent, then bring him back to work. If he says, If he asks you what kind of work there is for him to do, tell him that he will be employed to sweep dung, and that both of you will work with him." Then the two attendants immediately went in search of the impoverished son. When they found him and they told him this, at that time he took his pay and immediately went to work sweeping dung. The father, seeing his son, felt pity and wondered what to do. Then one day, while looking through the window, he saw his son in the distance appearing emancipated and wretched, soiled with dung and dirt. The father took off his necklaces, fine garments and ornaments, and put on some torn, filthy clothes. Covering himself with dirt and taking a dung sweeper in his right hand, he made himself look fearsome. He said to the workers, "Work hard and don't be lazy." Through this kind of skillful means, he was able to approach his son. He spoke to him further, saying, I want you to always work here. Don't go anywhere else, and I will pay you more. There will be no difficulty in getting the things you need, like utensils, rice, noodles, salt, and vinegar. I also have an old servant. If you need him, I'll give him to you. Be at ease. I'm just like your father, so don't worry about anything. Why am I doing this? Because I'm old and you're still young. Wherever you work, whenever you work, you are never lazy or sullen and never complain. I never see you in the bad qualities the other workers have. From now on, you will be just like my own son. Then the wealthy man immediately addressed him as his child. At that time, even though the impoverished son rejoiced at being treated this way, he nevertheless still considered himself a humble employee. For this reason, his father let him continue to sweep dung for 20 years. So the kid is like over 70 years old at this time, Father must not be doing too well either. At the end of this period of time, each had come to trust the other. I would hope so. Yet even though the son had free access to his father's house, he still lived in the same place as before. O Bhagavat, one day the wealthy man became ill and knew he was going to die before long. He said to the impoverished son, "This is what I've been thinking, and I want you to understand my intentions. I now have plenty of gold, silver, and precious treasures filling my storehouses. Get to know exactly how much is being taken in and out of them. Why do I want you to do this? Because you and I are one and the same. Take good care of our fortune and don't let it be lost." Then the impoverished son obeyed his instructions. Although he learned everything about the gold, silver, and precious treasures and the storehouses, he never wanted to take even the least amount. Nevertheless, he still lived in the same place as before and was still not able to get rid of this feeling of inferiority. After a short time had passed, the father knew that his son's mind had become composed, that his will had increased. His will had increased. His volitional wanting attitude, intent to participate, to do well, right? And that he was ashamed of his former feelings because he was growing out of his previous life conditions. When the father was just on the verge of death, he ordered his son to meet the king, ministers, kshatriyas, householders, and relatives who had already assembled here. The father then declared, "This is my son, my own progeny. When we were in a certain city, he left me and fled. He wandered around for more than 50 years undergoing hardships. His original name is such and such, and my name is such and such. Long ago, when I was in that city, I worried and searched for him. At last, unexpectedly, I met up with him. This is my true son, and I am, in truth, his father. All of the fortune I now possess belongs to my son. He already knows about our finances." O Bhagavat, at that time, The impoverished son, hearing what his father had said, became extremely happy at having obtained such an unprecedented experience. And then he thought, I never even considered receiving this. Nevertheless, this treasure house has come into my possession, though unsought and unwanted. O Bhagavat, this very wealthy man is the Tathagata, and all of us are the heirs of the Buddha. The Tathagata has always said that we are his children. Because of the triple sufferings, O Bhagavat, we experienced pain. We were confused, ignorant, and attached to inferior teachings in life after life, moment after moment, right? Day to day. Today, the Bhagavat has made us think about getting rid of the dung of fallacies regarding the reality of the world, and that in this respect, we diligently strove to attain the nirvana only as one seeking a salary for a single day's work. We had already attained it and were extremely happy and satisfied with it. We said to ourselves, because we have made diligent efforts to comprehend the Buddha's teachings, we have attained a great deal. But the Bhagavat had formerly perceived that we are attached to desires and content with lowly aspirations. While letting us be so, he did not explain that we were to have a portion of the treasure house of the Tathagata's wisdom and insight. Through the power of skillful means, the Bhagavat has taught the wisdom of the Tathagatas. Although we had attained nirvana from the Buddha as our salary for one day's labor, we thought we had attained much and did not seek the Mahayana. They're talking about the Lotus Sutra as the pinnacle of Mahayana, yeah? Furthermore, Shakyamuni himself said so. Furthermore, we had manifested and explained the wisdom of the Tathagata for the Bodhisattvas, but we ourselves had no aspiration regarding it. Why is this? The Buddha, knowing that we were content with lowly aspirations, taught us according to what is appropriate through the power of skillful means, to our capacity. But we did not know that we were really the heirs of the Buddha. Now we fully know that the Bhagavat is unstinting in regard to the wisdom of the Buddhas. What is the reason for this? We have actually been the heirs of the Buddha from long ago, even though we only yearned for the inferior teaching. If we had yearned for the superior teaching, then the Buddha would have taught the teachings of the Mahayana to us. If we had yearned for attitude and intent, you didn't ask for anything more, so I didn't push you. Yet, in this sutra, he has taught only the single vehicle. Well, you're here in attendance means a willingness to go further, so here it is. Now in the past, the Buddha revealed the Shravakas, those who yearned for the inferior teaching, in the presence of the Bodhisattvas, but actually the Buddha inspired them also with the Mahayana. That is why we say that though we originally had no desire to seek the great treasure of the King of the Dharma, it has now come to us unsought and unwanted. We have all attained what we should attain as the heirs of the Buddha. They just didn't understand that before. Thereupon, Mahakashyapa, wanting to elaborate on the meaning of this, further spoke in these verses. Let's see how many there are. Well, today we have heard the Buddha's words, and we are joyful and ecstatic at having attained such an unprecedented experience. The Buddha said that the Shravakas will be able to become Buddhas. The most magnificent jewels have been obtained without even being sought or awaited. Suppose there were a young and inexperienced child, who left his father and ran away to a distant country. He wandered around for more than 50 years, and his worried father looked for him everywhere. The father, exhausted from searching for him, remained in a city where he had a house built and enjoyed the desires of the five senses. His family built up a vast wealth of much gold, silver, mother of pearl, agate, pearls, lapis lazuli, elephants, house, blah, 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 blah. He earned interest through loans and deposits and had buyers and sellers throughout all the other regions. He was surrounded by thousands of myriads of kotas of people who held him in awe, always loved by the king and deeply respected by the subjects and powerful families. There were many people coming and going in different businesses. He was extremely wealthy and very powerful, and yet, as he grew older, he increasingly worried about his son. Day and night, he thought, "Soon I will die. My foolish son has abandoned me for over 50 years. What should I do with the various goods in my treasure houses?" At that time, the impoverished son was going from town to town, from one country to another, seeking food and clothing. Sometimes he obtained them, and sometimes he did not. He was emancipated from hunger, and his body emaciated from hunger, and his body was covered with scabies. Through his wanderings, he gradually reached the city where his father lived, and after having been employed at one place after another, finally ended up in his father's home. At that time, the wealthy man was sitting within the gate, on a lion's seat, sheltered by a huge jeweled canopy. He was surrounded by his attendants and guarded by his men. Some were counting gold, silver, jewels, and others were settling the finances, while others were keeping accounts. The impoverished son saw his father, who was extremely wealthy and dignified. He wondered if this man were a king or someone of equal rank. He became intimidated and wondered why he had gone there. He thought to himself, if I stay here for long, I'll be harassed and coerced into working. Thinking this, he ran away again. Seems to be his karma, right? Yeah, his karma, his capacity, his life condition. In search of a poor village where he could find employment. At that time, the wealthy man who was sitting on the lion's seat saw his son in the distance, though he recognized him and told no one, but sent his attendants to pursue him and bring him back. The impoverished son was terrified, cried out, and collapsed on the ground in confusion, thinking, since this man has seized me, I shall certainly be killed. In vain did I come here in search of food and clothing. The wealthy man knew that he knew what his son's thoughts were. They were humble and foolish, and that he would not believe what he said, nor believe that he was his father. Then, using skillful means, he dispatched other men with squint eyes, of small stature and little dignity, saying to them, "Tell him we'll employ you to sweep dung at double the wages you're earning now." Entreating his son to come toward his father without being intimidated, without knowing that this was his, well, actually, he didn't tell anyone else, but his son knew. Wasn't sure, though. Thought it might be someone else. When he heard this, the impoverished son was overjoyed and returned to sweep dung and clean houses. The wealthy man constantly watched his son through the window and thought that his son was foolish, right? Greed, anger, and foolishness, the three states of samsara, and willingly did menial tasks. Willingly, right? Willingly, again, I remind you, that was his mindset. It's not because he wanted to sweep dung. He thought that that was the best he could achieve, just like these senior disciples are describing their sudden astonishment at achieving Buddhahood. They just knew that was outside their realm of achievement. And yet, right, the teachings of Buddhism are all about being available, enlightenment being naturally inherent in everyone. But still, for 42 years, approximately, these senior disciples thought it was never going to be accessible to them. And the Buddha reinforced that. Skillful means, in this case, being, if I tell you you can have the whole pie, you won't respect it. You may even rebel against it, which would be horrible. Right? This is always the undercurrent of the lesson here. Then the wealthy man put on torn and filthy clothes, and holding a dung sweeper, went out to his son, just so he wouldn't intimidate his son, right? Trigger him, you would say in today's parlance. Don't want to trigger my son's fears and anxieties about wealth, the oppressors, right? I'll dress in his life condition so he'll talk to me and accept me into his confidence, yeah? He approached his son through this skillful means and said to him, "Work hard. I have already increased your wages and given you more balm for your feet, given you sufficient food and warm and thick mats." Do you see how the prose sections always give more precise or detailed information than the story does? It's odd, isn't it? He further advised him, saying sternly, "You should work diligently," and then gently added, "I will treat you like my son." So he's treating him like a boss, but a boss that has compassion for him. And the son is accepting it because this boss isn't completely out of his realm of his life condition. It's an important teaching lesson. The wealthy man being wise, the wealthy man being wise gradually gave him freedom of the house. And after 20 years had passed, let him become involved in the family business. But just trickles, right? A little bit, more and more the son is gaining some self-respect. Right? It was missing for so long that he just subjugated himself. This is samsara. This is what samsara does to us. We get so consumed by possessions and ownership and clinging and having, whether having more or whether fearsome of having more for the threat of competition and people trying to take from you, and right? It works in all directions. He showed him the gold, the silver, the pearls, all the jewels and treasures, and made him learn about all aspects of finances. Interesting. Yet the impoverished son still lived in a thatched hut outside the gate. Yeah, it's all well and good. I know about that. I'm learning a lot, but, it's not mine. It's not for me. But his mental capacity was growing about management and how to work with that stuff without fear. And considered himself poor, thinking that these things were not his own. The father knew that his son was gradually becoming more noble, and wanting to give him his fortune, he assembled the king, ministers, all the householders, everyone. He informed them in this great assembly, saying, "This is my son. He left me and stayed away for 50 years. 20 years have already passed since I saw my own son return here. Long ago, I lost my son in a certain city, and after wandering around in search of him, I ended up staying here. I entrust to him all the houses and men that I possess. They are all at his disposal." And the son thought, "Long ago I was poor and of lowly aspiration. Now at my father's place I have obtained an immense fortune. Of such things as precious jewels and houses I am overjoyed at having obtained such an unprecedented experience." Yeah, but now he has the capacity to accept it, willing acceptance, where in the past he would have been intimidated and run from it. So his life condition has slowly raised. It took 20 years. And now finally, now I can appreciate what all of this is. I can take over responsibility with dignity and respect for all of this wealth. Now, it's a very samsaric example, admittedly, but you get the analogy, right? The Buddha is also like this. The sutra continues. He knew that we yearned for the inferior teachings, so he never taught us that we should become Buddhas. Yet he did tell us that we had attained the stage of non-corruption, that we had achieved the inferior vehicle, and that we were disciples of the Shravaka vehicle. The Buddha told us to teach that those who practice the highest path would be able to become Buddhas. Accepting the Buddha's teachings, we explained the highest path for the great bodhisattvas, not for ourselves, though. But see, they learned how to manage the wealth. Accepting the Buddha's teaching, we explained the highest path for the great bodhisattvas, using various explanations and illustrations, skillful means, and many figures of speech. The heirs of the Buddha, The heirs of the Buddha heard the teachings from us, contemplated day and night, and practiced diligently. The Buddhas instantly made their predictions, saying, "You will be able to become Buddhas in the future." We have explained the essence of the treasured teachings of the Buddhas only for the sake of the bodhisattvas, but did not expound it for ourselves. Well, they did. Their intent, their willingness to accept for themselves, right? They kept at bay. But how could they explain it to someone else without knowing it? Just as the impoverished son who, after approaching his father, learned of various things, yet did not want them, so although we explained the treasure house of the teaching of the Buddhas, we never aspired to it. We thought that we had ourselves attained nirvana and considered this enough. We understood only this and did not think there was anything else. Even if we heard about the pure Buddha lands and leading and inspiring sentient beings, we never rejoiced in it. We just thought it was work. Why is this? Because although we thought thus, every existence is quiescent, neither produced nor extinguished, neither large nor small, incorrupted and unconditioned. We felt no eagerness. For days and nights we neither craved for nor did we were attached to the wisdom of Buddhas. Never did we aspire to it. Furthermore, we ourselves thought, with regard to the Dharma itself, that this was the ultimate goal after practicing the teaching of emptiness day and night. Right? Kind of nihilistic. This is as far as we go. Life is kind of meaningless. We just go through this cycle, birth and death. They were still attached to afterlives and that kind of thing, right? Still, though they saw the reality, and this is a point I want to make, of every existence being quiescent, ultimately, that this arising, abiding, and dissolution is just a fantasy, that ultimately we're all quiescent energy, they were missing the point that this arising, abiding, and dissolution, this temporary state of samsara, is our precious opportunity to grasp the entirety of the engine of life. They were missing that point. And therefore, they weren't living a full human sentient life. They were living a life of service without understanding that the goal of their service was enlightenment for themselves and others. You see? With this, after practicing the teachings of emptiness day and night, we were able to shake off the sufferings of the triple world and bearing our last bodies, abiding in the nirvana with residue. Remember, look up nirvana in the Buddhism reference. You'll see two different with and without residue, right? We were led and inspired by the Buddhas so that our attainment of the path was not in vain. And we have already been able to pass on the benefits we received from the Buddha. Now I'm going to stop here and we'll continue. So there's a multifold lesson happening here, right? Certainly we're talking about skillful means, but we're not just talking about Shakyamuni using skillful means for the benefit of teaching his students. We're now getting into the nitty-gritty of skillful means to understand how you and I propagate this teaching. First, by our very act of enlightenment for ourselves, by example, by just being dedicated students of Buddhism, Lotus Sutra Buddhists. But in our influence of others at their capacity. Very important lesson, yeah? All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your support. Take a few seconds to like and subscribe. It does wonders for the algorithm. It's propagation, so it's a bodhisattva effort. So thank you for that. And if you can, please make use of the ebooks through threefoldlotus.com or print books if you prefer. I do, but that's not the fashion today. The mandala, get a correct mandala. Use the free stuff. There's free podcasts of all of these videos. There's free information, research of my own that's you can download or read online at threefoldlotus.com. All the links are below. So please make use of that. And all of it supports our effort. So once again, I'm incredibly grateful for that and your practice. Yeah. So keep your practice strong. Be kind to yourself. Take care of your health. And I'll see you in the next one. All right? Bye for now.